This was an interesting question. And so a few things come up with this. Number one, um, we have people that are quote unquote athletes today that, they might train hard. But I don't think as many people are training as hard as they actually think they are. I think that this one percenter is actually accurate. And the human body, when you look at what we used to have a couple thousand years ago, no electricity, no, everything was manual labor. We were some tough cookies back then and had to battle the elements a heck of a lot more than we have to now with heat and air conditioning and all the comforts and food, and we didn't have to find anything or fight for anything. And so the human body is actually really very, very resilient. In fact, when you look at how many people are chronically ill and really chronically ill and practically killing themselves with the food that they're eating and the stuff that they're drinking, and yet they keep going too. So I just want to say that because to this question, I will say I don't think that there's a whole heck of a lot of these markers, although there are some, and that's why I say not entirely. And I believe, and this is, I think, even if you're not seeing these one percenters, I think this is relevant to everybody, that physiology is physiology. The example that I use is just GGT. GGT is a marker of oxidative stress. I don't care if you're an elite athlete or you're a sedentary sitting on the couch playing video games all day. Physiologically, GGT does what GGT does. It's going to be a marker of oxidative stress, glutathione need, those kind of things. The other thing that I wanted to point out is, I've said this before, but I say it often, it bears repeating though, and that is that, I'll minimize this here. I strongly believe in looking at labs first before you know why somebody's coming in. And that's what I basically say here is we get biased really fast and really easily. And so if you know that somebody's coming in for a blank symptom, and then we look at the labs, you look for the justification of that symptom using those labs. Versus if you look at the lab first and you don't know anything but the age and the gender of the person, you have no bias at all. And you look at each and every one of them more thoroughly than you would if you were just looking at the lab after the fact. And so that's what I say here is always consider an individual's physiology first and then apply whatever external variables they might be. Like, for example, if you see high red blood cell hemoglobin and hematocrit, that could be a whole bunch of things. It could be, dehydration. It could be high testosterone. It could be too much erythropoietin for some reason. But then you find out that they're living in a high elevation, or maybe they're training there, or they're from Denver, and then that's normal, or they're a smoker, or whatever it might be. And that's the cause for the high red blood cell hemoglobin and hematocrit. But if you know that they're a smoker living in Denver first, then you won't consider a high red blood cell hemoglobin and hematocrit for any other reason. You'll say, oh, that's why. And you won't look at testosterone and you won't look at dehydration. So I always say that first. Now, there's a caveat to all of this, and this is actually, I think this is applicable to anybody, even if you don't see this very sort of elite level of people. And that is, and I'll slow down a little bit with this, and I want you guys to, we like to look at a marker, it's high, it's low, and done, right? But I talk about something, I call it here physiological efficiency. And here's just a couple examples. So if someone has low white blood cell count, let's say it's 2.3, which by basically all standards is going to be low. Is there a possibility that in that particular person, they have a really efficient immune system and they don't get sick very often? And if they do get sick, then the body takes care of it pretty well. And they don't have any apparently chronic infections of any kind or anything else going on. Is it possible that they just have a very efficient immune system? And maybe for some reason in a rare person, being below normal is actually normal for them. And we don't have to worry about it, can be concerned about it or dig for it. And I've seen this, and I use that as an example because I've seen that in some really healthy type people. I'll just say that. Another classic one, and this is a question that I have too, and I'll just briefly mention this also, but is normal, like, can somebody have normal TSH and low T4, low T3? Now that wouldn't make sense. Why is T4 and T3 low and TSH actually happy with those levels of T4 and T3? But they don't have any hypothyroid symptoms, and by all accounts, it seems like they're working well. Now I have this little small at the end here, but we talk about insulin resistance. You can have cortisol resistance. You can have thyroid hormone resistance. You can be resistant to just about any hormone or neurotransmitter. That also means, however, that you can be sensitive to a hormone or a neurotransmitter. And I've used this term before in different programs, but insulin hypersensitivity. And what that means is that somebody can have totally normal levels of insulin. Follow this, normal levels of insulin, but because the receptors are overly sensitive to insulin, it works as if it was elevated. And so in this person, you might see normal TSH, low T4, low T3, and think, well, they have low thyroid. But not always. They might have a very efficient thyroid hormone system where that level of T4 is all they need in order to operate perfectly. They have normal body temperature. They don't have any kind of metabolic issues that you can see. I just throw that out there because we usually look at something and say, no, that's wrong. That's too low. And in some cases, I will tell you that that's not the case, that low number is normal for that person. You might ask, well, how do you know when that is? You look for all the reasons that low T4 might be there. And if you can't find it, it might be normal for that person. So I have there low hormone plus a heightened receptor sensitivity might be normal for that person. And now I say that because think about these elite people for a second, is they are putting such demands on their body that their body, and we have a finite capacity for work, that the body might make certain things more efficient in order to be able to maximize the energy requirements elsewhere, if that makes sense. So maybe they make their immune system more efficient. Maybe they make their thyroid hormone receptors more sensitive in order to put less energy towards those things so that they could put more energy somewhere else. So that's why I called it, I don't know where I put it here, physiological efficiency or adaptation or compensation. Okay, so that's that. Also,